If you're looking for a simple way to get the soft effect of animal fur, a great technique to use is to use 4 tools together. And those 4 tools are Graphite Pencil, a blending stump, a pencil eraser, and a kneaded eraser. If you think about working in layers and using each tool in each one of these individual layers as you progress, it makes building up the effects of fur, and especially soft fur, an easy process to take on. And I'm laying in the general fur pattern and not worrying about variations in value, but just applying the same even tone. And this is essentially the first layer. Then I use what's called a blending stump. If you're not familiar with a blending stump, it is basically just paper that is rolled very tightly and to a point. And a blending stump allows you to do a couple of different things, but for this rendering, I'm basically smoothing out the areas of the pattern that I laid down with the graphite and blending it smoothly into the white of the paper. And the reason for that is I'm using the white of the paper as part of the pattern for this cat. So it's essentially just the white and the graphite that create the pattern as opposed to another layer of lighter graphite. If you're interested in seeing the entire demo of this cat illustration in its entirety, I'm going to link the video for that at the end of this one. The demo for that is much longer, and this one is just focused on the materials. So the blending stump is really such a great tool because it allows you to extend what you were trying to do with the graphite onto the paper. And it's very forgiving in that regard, meaning if you didn't lay down the graphite in exactly the aesthetic that you were looking for, the blending stump allows you to smooth that out. So keep in mind, the blending stump can only work with what you've laid down with the graphite, meaning it's only going to be able to create from what you've rendered. So the reason I'm pointing that out is it's easy to make the mistake of almost thinking of the blending stump like a pencil, and it's not going to act that way. It's basically just finessing what you've already rendered with your pencil. So after you've used your pencils on the blending stump, the next 2 layers or next layer is essentially using tools that remove the graphite. And for this pass, I'm using a kneaded eraser. Using the kneaded eraser allows you to pull out lighter values and finesse and fine tune your pattern texture of the fur. If you put a really light touch on the kneaded eraser, you can also pull out areas of the dark value that are a little bit too far gone and lighten those up, and that helps to create that illusion of softness in the fur. If you're interested in getting this reference image, this is actually my own cat when she was a kitten. I have it posted in my Patreon community, so be sure to go and check that out. I have a link for my community down below. And another tool to use for removing the graphite and other erasing tools, what's called a pencil eraser. And if you haven't heard of this, it's a really great tool to use because you can sharpen it in a pencil sharpener. So when you look at the tip, the rubber white tip here, that's essentially acts like a pencil, and you can sharpen it in a pencil sharpener, which is great because you can get it to a really fine point and pull out highlights and details. So the way I used it on this rendering was to put the highlights on the eyeball of the cat, but you can imagine how that could be used on the fur as well to pull out details of fine white furs. And you'll notice here I have in my drawer of my easel what's called a tortillion, and a tortillion is a smaller, finer pointed version of a blending stump. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to go pick up a blending stump, the tortillion is another one you could grab, but it's only one-sided, but it gives you much more detail and finer detail. So I think the biggest thing to take away from this video is to use multiple tools together in layers and work in layers to create those effects of soft fur. And there's really no specific order you need to go in other than laying down the graphite, obviously first, and then the next layers are essentially removing and smoothing. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. My name is David. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.